Dawn and Antonio Armstrong were the couple everyone admired. Successful, devoted parents, pillars of their community. But behind the perfect image, something sinister was brewing in their own home, and no one could have imagined that the person who would destroy it all was sleeping just down the hall. Dawn and Antonio Armstrong were the type of couple that people admired from afar. They had what seemed to be the ideal life: 3 beautiful children, a thriving business, and a reputation built on faith, family, and hard work. Antonio had once played professional football and had turned that success into a respected fitness brand in Houston. Dawn, with her warm smile and graceful presence, volunteered at local charities and was seen by many as the heart of the Armstrong family. Together, they were the embodiment of success, and their large, elegant home in a peaceful suburban neighborhood only reinforced that image. They were active in their community and church, known for hosting weekend cookouts and helping neighbors in times of need. Their social media profiles reflected a well-balanced family, one that seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. They took family vacations, celebrated birthdays with themed parties, and often posted inspirational quotes alongside happy family pictures. People often said that the Armstrongs were goals, but beneath the smiles and public appearances, subtle signs hinted that everything was not as perfect as it appeared. Their eldest son, Jaden, had begun to change. Once a charismatic and high-achieving student, his personality had shifted in recent years. He had grown distant, isolating himself from friends and family. His grades slipped. He stopped showing up to football practices. He started staying up late into the night, often keeping his bedroom door locked for hours. Teachers contacted Dawn and Antonio about his declining performance and odd behavior, but nothing seemed to work. Counseling sessions were scheduled, and conversations were had, but Jaden remained closed off. While his parents worried privately, they continued to present a united, cheerful image to the outside world. The younger children, Kayla and Bryce, still thrived. Kayla was a bright student with a love for music, and Bryce was often seen tossing a football in the yard, following in his father's footsteps. To visitors, the house seemed full of life. But those closest to the family began to notice small things: Jaden's absence during family events, the tension in Antonio's face when certain subjects came up, the way Dawn's smile sometimes faded too quickly. Antonio, known for his discipline and structure, tried to reach Jaden by spending more time with him at the gym and encouraging him to take on responsibilities at the family business. Dawn, ever the nurturer, tried to talk to her son with patience and love. Yet nothing they did seemed to draw him out. There were whispers among relatives that Jaden might be depressed or even angry, though no one could point to a specific reason. He had never been in trouble with the law. He didn't drink or use drugs. But his silence had become unnerving. Privately, Dawn confided in a close friend that she felt something was off with Jaden, though she couldn't explain why. Antonio believed the boy just needed direction and time. After all, being a teenager was never easy, especially in a family where success and expectations loomed large. There was one incident that stuck out in Dawn's memory, a late-night argument overheard by one of the neighbors. Raised voices, followed by a slammed door. When asked, Dawn simply said it was nothing serious, just a family disagreement. But her eyes betrayed her words. Whatever had happened that night left her more guarded than before. Still, the Armstrongs kept going. They attended church that weekend as usual. Antonio gave a brief motivational talk during youth night. Dawn helped organize a fundraiser for a local shelter. To the outside world, nothing seemed out of place. But inside their home, invisible cracks were widening. Tension hung in the air like static before a storm. The kind of tension that people often dismiss until it's too late. No one could have predicted what was coming. No one could have imagined that in a house so full of life, something so dark was quietly taking shape. It was the kind of night that made people uneasy. Thick clouds blanketed the sky, and a slow, steady rain tapped against rooftops across the quiet Houston suburb. The wind whistled through trees, and thunder rolled in the distance. Inside the Armstrong home, the lights were dim, the air still, and the only sounds were the hum of electronics and the occasional creak of settling walls. Everyone had gone to bed, or so it seemed. At exactly 1:48 a.m., a 911 call came in from the Armstrong residence. The voice on the other end was soft, shaky, and oddly controlled. It was Jaden Armstrong. He reported that he had heard gunshots and didn't know what was happening. Police and emergency responders were dispatched immediately. When officers arrived, they were met with an eerie silence. The front door was locked. They were forced to enter through the garage, which led them into the main hallway of the house. It was clean, orderly, almost undisturbed, until they reached the master bedroom. Inside, they found Antonio Armstrong lying face down on the floor, barely breathing, with a gunshot wound to his head. Dawn Armstrong was in the bed, motionless. She had been shot through a pillow, most likely while she slept. Blood had soaked into the sheets, and the air in the room felt heavy and unnatural. The walls bore no signs of a struggle. There was no broken glass, no overturned furniture, no forced entry. Paramedics quickly tended to Antonio, who was still alive but unresponsive. Dawn was declared dead at the scene. Their two younger children, Kayla and Bryce, were found unharmed in their rooms, fast asleep or pretending to be. Jaden was downstairs, sitting on the couch, visibly shaken but uninjured. The officers began securing the scene. One of them noticed something strange. The home's security system had been disabled just hours before the shooting. The control panel showed that someone had manually turned off the alarm around midnight. That detail raised immediate questions. The murder weapon, a .22 caliber pistol, was found hidden inside a hallway closet behind a pile of old coats. It belonged to Antonio, legally registered and normally kept in a locked safe in the bedroom. The safe showed no signs of damage. It had been opened carefully and nothing else inside was taken. The gun had no visible fingerprints, though it had clearly been used. Detectives started their initial questioning. Jaden told them he had gone to bed around 11 p.m. and woke up to the sound of two loud pops. He said he got up, checked on his siblings, and then called 911. His voice was calm, perhaps too calm, and his story didn't quite match the timeline investigators were building. As officers moved through the house, more inconsistencies appeared. The back door was locked from the inside. All the windows were secured. There was no sign of forced entry anywhere. Whoever had committed the crime had either come in with a key or was already inside when it happened. Forensics began their work. The path the shooter had taken seemed deliberate. The killer knew the house well. The camera hard drive that should have recorded the hallway and stairwell had been wiped. Police retrieved only partial fragments, one of which showed a blurred figure in the hallway around 1:30 a.m. The figure appeared to be slender and roughly Jaden's height. Neighbors didn't report seeing or hearing anything unusual that night. One woman said she heard a car drive away around 2:01 a.m., but she wasn't certain which direction it had gone or what type it was. Another neighbor mentioned the house had been unusually quiet all week. No music or laughter like there usually was. As investigators reviewed the evidence, they noticed something chilling. The Armstrong house had become a crime scene without a single sign of chaos. No alarms, no screams, no shattered glass, just silence, precision, and death. All signs pointed to a crime committed with disturbing familiarity and unsettling calm. Suspicion was growing, but the truth was still hidden in the shadows. The peaceful home where everyone once felt safe had become the center of a mystery that no one could explain. Yet, the investigation into the murders of Dawn and Antonio Armstrong quickly intensified. What had at first appeared to be a tragic home invasion gone wrong now seemed far more complex. The absence of forced entry, the precise targeting of the victims, and the careful handling of the weapon all raised serious doubts. Within days, the focus shifted inward, to the people who were inside the house that night. Detectives began by interviewing every member of the Armstrong household. Kayla and Bryce, the younger children, offered little information. They had heard nothing unusual, they said, only learning something was wrong when police arrived. Their accounts were consistent, and both appeared genuinely confused and frightened. But Jaden's behavior stood out immediately. He remained strangely composed, even detached. When asked to recount the events of the night, he gave short, emotionless answers. He claimed he had heard 2 gunshots, then rushed to check on his siblings. But his movements, according to the recovered camera footage, told a different story. Though much of the home's surveillance data had been erased, forensic experts managed to recover fragments. One clip showed a figure walking from the upstairs hallway toward the master bedroom at 1:36 a.m., just 12 minutes before the 911 call. The figure's height and build appeared to match Jaden's, but the image was too blurry for definitive identification. Still, it was enough to raise serious concerns. Investigators searched Jaden's bedroom and found more troubling evidence. His laptop revealed a search history filled with violent content. There were queries like, how to make a murder look like a break-in, undetectable poisons, and can deleted security footage be recovered? Some of the searches were made only days before the murders. They also found screenshots of crime scenes from other high-profile cases, along with visits to obscure online forums where users discussed planning crimes in graphic detail. More was uncovered in his personal journal. Inside its pages were writings that painted a much darker image of Jaden. He expressed deep resentment toward his parents. He described feelings of being ignored, misunderstood, and even trapped. One disturbing passage read like a plan. If they won't let me be free, I'll make my own way. Silence them all. Leave no trace. Friends and former classmates were brought in for questioning. Several revealed that Jaden had changed drastically in the last year. Once outgoing and funny, he had grown isolated and cynical. One friend mentioned a chilling conversation where Jaden had joked that the perfect crime was killing someone in your own house because nobody would expect it. At the time, it was brushed off as dark humor. Now it seemed like a warning that had gone unnoticed. The gun used in the murder was traced back to the locked safe in Antonio and Dawn's bedroom. There were no signs of forced entry into the safe, which meant someone who knew the code must have opened it. That list of people was short, and Jaden was on it. He had often helped his father clean and store the weapon. Forensics also revealed a faint trail of gunpowder residue on the sweatshirt Jaden had worn that night. He claimed it came from a previous visit to the shooting range with his father, but experts determined the particles were fresh. Jaden's digital activity also included searches for methods of deleting security camera data and how long it takes for gunshot wounds to become fatal. Investigators were beginning to see the outline of a calculated, premeditated act, not a spontaneous fit of rage. Despite the mounting evidence, Jaden never confessed. He stuck to his story, maintaining he had nothing to do with what happened. But the facts were stacking up against him. With no sign of forced entry, a deleted security feed, online searches about staging crimes, and his calm demeanor throughout the investigation, the picture grew increasingly clear to detectives. What was most disturbing was not just the crime itself, but how methodically it appeared to have been planned. The murders weren't the result of panic or confusion. They were carried out with intention, by someone who knew the house intimately, someone who had lived there, who had been loved and trusted. The investigation had started with shock and confusion. Now it was turning into something far darker, a hunt for truth within a family torn apart by betrayal. As the case moved toward trial, the community surrounding the Armstrong family was still struggling to process the unthinkable. What had once seemed like a senseless tragedy was now being shaped into a chilling narrative of betrayal. Jaden Armstrong, the 16-year-old son of the victims, was formally charged with the murders of his parents. The news sent shockwaves through Houston, where the Armstrongs were respected and admired. Many refused to believe it. Others, haunted by the details emerging from the investigation, began to see a different side of the story, one where darkness had been hiding in plain sight. Jaden's defense team immediately began building their case. They portrayed him as a misunderstood teenager caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They insisted that no physical evidence directly tied him to the shootings and emphasized the lack of definitive proof in the blurry surveillance footage. His lawyers argued that the gunpowder residue could have easily transferred from previous handling of the weapon, and that the internet searches could have been curiosity, not intent. They introduced the theory of an unknown intruder, someone who had gained access to the home through other means, though they could provide no evidence to support it. But the prosecution had constructed a timeline that painted a far more disturbing picture. They presented the search history, the journal entries, and the deleted security footage as parts of a carefully executed plan. They argued that Jayden had used his knowledge of the home's layout, security system, and weapon storage to carry out the murders undetected. They called forensic experts who testified about the age of the gunpowder residue and the technical difficulty of wiping surveillance data. Everything, they said, pointed to a calculated, deliberate act committed by someone who felt no remorse. Then came the most damning piece of evidence, an email. Recovered from Jayden's draft folder, it was dated the day before the murders. The email had never been sent. Its subject line read, "Midnight Plan," and inside was a bulleted list. Wait until house is quiet, disable alarm, wear gloves, use pillow to muffle, hide weapon, call police after. The list matched the actual sequence of events almost perfectly. When asked on the stand about it, Jayden offered no explanation. His silence filled the courtroom. A former classmate of Jayden's was brought in to testify. She recalled a chilling moment from months earlier when Jayden had casually said, "If you get rid of the problem, you get peace." At the time, it had seemed like an odd, harmless comment, but in light of everything, it took on new meaning. The classmate broke down in tears while recalling it. The jury deliberated for several hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Jayden Armstrong was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom remained silent as the judge read the sentence. No reaction came from Jayden. He stood still, staring straight ahead. After the trial, the Armstrong home was sold. It remained empty for a long time before new occupants moved in. Kayla and Bryce were placed in the care of their mother's sister and were kept away from the public eye. The community held vigils for Dawn and Antonio, remembering them not for the tragedy, but for the lives they lived, their kindness, their generosity, and their love. Yet the case left a permanent scar. People spoke in hushed tones about how something so horrific could happen within such a seemingly perfect family. The story of the Armstrongs served as a grim reminder that even the most picture-perfect lives can hide deep fractures. No one would have imagined that the person responsible for such devastation could be someone raised within those very walls, under the roof where trust was supposed to be absolute. The most haunting part of the story wasn't just the loss of two lives. It was the betrayal that came from within. A quiet house on a stormy night, a well-executed plan, and a son whose heart had gone dark.